Mixed martial arts is undoubtedly one of the fastest-growing sports around the world. But what's with most of the best fighters coming from just a handful of countries? 4 or 5 countries dominate the world of MMA, with some other countries appearing to have absolutely no interest in it whatsoever. Today we're discussing 5 countries with a strong MMA focus, and some others which don't seem to care at all. Stay tuned. Let's get straight into it then. First up, it's the USA. Let's get one thing straight. The USA is hands down the biggest MMA market in the entire world, and some of the greatest mixed martial artists of all time hail from the States. The top 2 promotions in the world, UFC and Bellator, are both based in America, and fighters from all over the globe have moved to the country in a bid to improve their fortunes and hopefully get noticed by the big boys. Over the course of MMA's short history, so far, some of the best fighters ever have come from America. Fighters like BJ Penn, John Jones, Demetrius Johnson, Robbie Lawler, Daniel Cormier, and Ronda Rousey have all been UFC champions at one point or another, and the fact that the sport as we know it today was developed in America in the early 1990s means that they had a head start on most other countries. Which one of those guys was your favorite? The Americans also have a huge college wrestling program and a long and storied history in boxing, 2 of the main aspects of MMA. When you add into the equation the money on offer in the States, then you begin to realize just why they have become so successful in the sport. And given the massive growth and expansion the sport is enjoying at the moment, don't bet against the Americans being on the top for the foreseeable future. Who is your favorite American fighter right now? We're talking about Russia next. Stay tuned. Like America, Russia has some of the baddest men on the planet when it comes to mixed martial arts. Legends of the game, such as Fyodor Emelianenko and Habib Nurmagomedov, hail from the massive country. Oh, did we mention that current lightweight king Islam Makhachev is also Russian? The country has a strong focus on wrestling, Dagestan in particular, and also counts Sambo as one of its biggest martial arts. Both Habib and Islam are world champions in the discipline, and most Russian fighters are well versed in the art. One of the main reasons why there are so many Russian fighters is because they take pride in combat and see MMA as a way out of poverty. Another reason is due to the fact that the areas around the Caucasus, Chechnya, and Dagestan, wrestling is the most popular sport, more popular than even football in some places. Other MMA stars from the country include the great bantamweight and former UFC champion Petr Yan, as well as Askar Askarov, Alexander Volkov, and Alexander Shlemenko. And while Russia doesn't have the biggest population in the world, they seem to enjoy their status as one of the toughest nations on the planet. So don't expect their MMA representation to shrink anytime soon. Who is your favorite Russian fighter at the moment? Give us your thoughts below. Brazil is up next. Another country with a super strong focus on MMA is the biggest country in South America, Brazil. As of right now, they have 2 UFC champions, Davison Figueiredo and Amanda Nunes. But they have also produced some of the greatest MMA fighters of all time, 2 of whom are regularly brought up when the conversation turns to MMA GOATs. Anderson Silva is universally accepted as the greatest middleweight of all time, while Jose Aldo held down the featherweight crown for years during his prime. One of the biggest aspects of MMA also happens to be Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, made famous by the Gracie family, who of course hail from Brazil. Royce Gracie demonstrated in the first ever UFC tournament how BJJ is pretty much the trump card when it comes to MMA by beating 3 men in one night, all via choke. Once he had proved just how useful Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was in the early 1990s, interest in the sport in his native Brazil boomed overnight, and the country has since provided hundreds of world-class Jiu-Jitsu practitioners and scores of world champions. MMA is now one of the leading sports in the country, and parents are just as likely to sign their children up for a BJJ class as they are to put them into a football or beach volleyball team. And for this reason, Brazil will always be one of the biggest producers of mixed martial artists in the world. Who is the best Brazilian fighter right now in your opinion? Next up, it's the UK. Stay with us. The UK was pretty slow on the uptake with MMA and didn't have a champion until Michael Bisping shocked the world in 2016 by dethroning Luke Rockhold. Since then, interest in the sport has increased exponentially, and some of the biggest prospects in the world are currently British fighters. UFC lightweight Paddy Pimblett is tipped to win a UFC title at some point in his career, having won the Cage Warriors title before he arrived in the top promotion, and the current UFC welterweight featherweight king, Leon Edwards, also hails from England. Then we have top featherweight contender Arnold Allen, who is currently on a 10-fight win streak in the top promotion. And we haven't even addressed the big fellas yet. Darren Till was once tipped as a middleweight title hopeful, but one of the biggest championship hopefuls from the UK is undoubtedly heavyweight star Tom Aspinall. He unfortunately suffered defeat last time out against Curtis Blades, but that was only after he blew out his knee after 15 seconds. He will definitely be back. While MMA hasn't always been on the radar of sports fans in the UK in the past, that has changed in a huge way over the past decade, and the small European nation now produces some of the most talented and dangerous fighters on the planet. Who is the biggest prospect from the UK in your opinion? Let us know what you think below. We're talking about New Zealand and Australia now. Don't go anywhere. Okay, we get it. We're including these two countries together, but there are a ton of Aussies who train over at Kick City Boxing in New Zealand. So give us a break, okay? Currently boasting two UFC champions from the same CKB gym in Auckland, New Zealand is one of the biggest up-and-coming MMA hubs. Australia's Alexander Volkanovski also trains there and is the current featherweight king, who is also recognized by most in the game as the greatest pound-for-pound fighter on the planet right now. And then we have Izzy, the Nigerian Kiwi, is the current middleweight champion and is universally recognized as one of the greatest strikers in MMA right now. Add to this other fighters such as the durable Dan Hooker and the tough Brad Riddell, and everyone's favorite heavyweight Tai Tuivasa, then the future of MMA Down Under seems to be in safe hands. There is also the likes of former middleweight champion Robert Whittaker, who is easily the second best middleweight on the planet just now, as well as current light heavyweight contender Tyson Pedro, who has just returned from a prolonged spell out through injury. We then have former flyweight interim champion Kai Kara France, as well as women's flyweight stunner Jessica Rose Clark. Similar to the UK, MMA hasn't always been the dominant sport in New Zealand and Australia, but with the influx of so many world-class fighters of late, the sport has enjoyed unparalleled success down under recently. Who's your favorite? And finally, what about the countries with no MMA representation? There are plenty of nations around the world who have very little interest in mixed martial arts. Some of the most notable are European nations, such as Portugal, Belgium, and Norway. But this is easily explainable, as European countries in general have a much stronger interest in football. Another country with limited interest in MMA is India. There have been recent reports that it is slowly beginning to have an impact on the younger generation on the subcontinent, but it has a long way to go before it knocks cricket off the top spot. Of course, the likelihood is that MMA will never even get close to the huge support and love the people of India have for cricket, but they do have a couple of big prospects in one, so you never know. While Francis Ngannou and other fighters of Western African background, such as Kamaru and Izzy, are currently making waves in the UFC, the sport is much less popular in Central and East Africa, largely due to economic factors. Training at a gym requires a membership, and then you need to purchase training gear, which simply isn't on people's radars in poorer developing countries, which is completely understandable. Give us some other countries who don't particularly care about MMA below. As always, thanks for stopping by today, and remember to tune in again next time when we'll be discussing all sorts of other cool bits and pieces. And why not do us a big favor by liking and sharing today's video while also subscribing to our channel. Bye guys!